Moving goods from, to or across Great Britain beginning on the 1st of January is big news. Avoid significant delays and minimise disruption and costs. Find out what you need to do now and what supports are in place, because even small businesses need to know about these big changes. Go to gov.ie/Brexit, an initiative of the Government of Ireland.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
You're very welcome back to Off the Ball on this Sunday afternoon. Will O'Callaghan sitting in for Joe Malloy this Sunday. We're going to take a look at the back pages from the Sunday Papers now. To review the papers with us today, we've also got Rory O'Connor, who is the Irish Rugby correspondent with the Irish Independent, and we're joined as well by Mary O'Connor, who's a former Cork player and the current CEO of the Federation of Irish Sport. But before we bring the guys in, let's have a look at what's been making the back pages. Understandably, a lot of fallout from last night's game at the Stade de France between Ireland and France at the end of the Six Nations. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday is guillotined, and this picture of CJ Stander at the end of the game. France coming through by 35 points to 27. Ireland needed a victory by 6 points with the try after Italy were able to keep England scoring down. But France not meeting the 31-point differential that they were going to need to win the championship. So in the end, England crowned as champions after their victory in Rome earlier in the day. France finished in second place and Ireland in third. A lot of match reports across the papers today, and also a look forward to what should happen with the Irish rugby team. But that's dominating the back page today of the Mail on Sunday. Untouchable Tribe as well. Top-class Galway relieve Wexford of their Leinster crown. A 13-point victory for a side inspired by Joe Canning and also Brian Concannon last evening at Croke Park. So Wexford very tamely letting go of their Leinster Championship title. They lost their handle on the Delaney Cup, being defeated by Galway. Also a look at the shock win for Cavan against Monaghan. Cavan relegated from Division 2 of the National Football League last week, dusted themselves down, Mickey Graham's side, and knocked Monaghan out of the championship in a real thriller in the Ulster Championship, which looked like it was going to penalties, but in the end it was decided just at the end of extra time. The Sun today, Halloween shocker, and also a lot of focus on Johnny Sexton. We'll be talking about the discussion around his captaincy in some of the rest of the papers. Another pun being used in the top right corner for Cavan's victory after extra time, 215 to 117 against Monaghan. Cavan a laugh after that victory, and they've got a picture there of Garrod McKernan and Conor McKenna celebrating Cavan's victory against Monaghan at Clones. Newspaper quotes in a lot of the papers today about Pep Guardiola, who gave his press conference on Friday, and in the embargoed section he was pressed on the idea that he could go back to Barcelona next year because elections are due to take place in the new year in Barcelona after their president stepped down earlier this week. And Font, one of the main contenders to become the new president, said he wanted to try and entice Pep Guardiola back to Catalonia at the end of his contract with Manchester City after the current season. But Pep Guardiola says he is too old and does not have the energy for another stint at his boyhood club. He said when he left them nearly 7 years ago now that he didn't feel that he was able to stay with the stress and the pressure of managing Barcelona. He said he needed to let his seatbelt off. Eventually went to Bayern Munich, and now he's into his 5th year with Man City. He has never stayed previously for 5 seasons with a club. Plenty of speculation about whether he'll still be at Man City beyond the end of the season, but Pep Guardiola quite insistent that he will not be going back to Barcelona at the end of his contract with Man City. And also David Moyes' comments picked up on after West Ham's game against Liverpool. Liverpool coming through 2-1 with a winner from Diogo Jota in the Premier League last night. But David Moyes has said that Mo Salah dived for the penalty which he scored to equalise in the game. So Mo dived, Moyes is on the back of the Sun this morning as well. Game on, football survives PM's new lockdown is the back page of the Irish Sunday Mirror. It's after Boris Johnson announced last evening at around 7 o'clock that Britain is going into an effective lockdown, joining most of the rest of Europe, but the Premier League will be able to continue and other elite sports in the UK. So it means any concerns that the Premier League would be brought to a halt have now been put to one side. Also, you can see that picture of Diogo Jota on the back of the paper after his goal to give Liverpool victory. It sees Liverpool go back to the top of the Premier League table for a few hours at least. After 7 games, Liverpool have 16 points. Everton, if they win in the 2 o'clock kickoff this afternoon, can go back on top. But Liverpool currently top of the Premier League. A picture of Tig Byrne as well about the defeat for Ireland against France. Ireland 35, Ireland 27. You can see the disappointed face of Tig Byrne, who I thought had a pretty good game for Ireland in the second row last evening. And also, again, more questions about Johnny Sexton after Sexton admitted that Ireland weren't ruthless enough in that game at the Stade de France. And in terms of the GAA, Chris Beach's story on the back of the Sunday Mirror today is a fright night for the Cats, who pip a win in the end. They were 16 points up at a stage against Dublin, but Dublin had a dramatic comeback and possibly could have even snatched the game at the end. But Brian Cody's side holding on for a 1-point win at Croke Park. We'll be talking about hurling in a lot more detail a little bit later with James E. O'Connor. The back page of the Sunday Independent, again, that Liverpool story back on top. And we see Jota again celebrating his goal at Anfield last evening. Liverpool returning to the top of the Premier League after their 2-1 win against West Ham. The headline used by the Sunday Independent on the back of Ireland's defeat in Paris is Les Miserables. Plenty of French puns and French headlines being used today. And we'll be talking as well in the pay-per-view about Eamon Sweeney's story, which is flagged up in the top right-hand corner of the back page of the Sunday Independent. And that is talking about Grandstand after the passing this week of its legendary presenter, which will take up most of the back page. But it's one of the feature pieces which we're going to be having a look at. Frank Boff, who passed away at the age of 85 this week, a pioneer in terms of the way that sport was broadcast in the UK. So plenty to talk about there. Also in the Mail today, you've got a very interesting article which will be talking about a big interview between Ollie Holes and Marco van Basten. Also plenty of coverage around Nobby Styles today. The back of the Sunday Times, we've got tribal chiefs after Galway's victory against Wexford at Croke Park in that Leinster hurling semi-final which took place last evening. Paris misery is their take. Again, a similar picture to many of the newspapers used of CJ Stander at the end of the game. That's after Ireland missing out on the chance to claim the title as England won their third in 5 seasons. Disappointment for Alan Wynne-Jones too, as he won his 149th cap, a record in the sport of rugby, but Scotland winning against Wales and Clonetly by 14 points to 10 yesterday afternoon. And England, the view is England stutter past Italy, but do just about enough to win the Six Nations. And some of the English columnists, including Stephen Jones and Stuart Barnes, are wondering if England have improved since the World Cup in Japan last year. And finally, in the Sunday World today, again, Cavan and Monaghan is there. Raymond Galligan, who kicked the winning point, the Cavan captain, getting pride of place over on the left-hand side. Pat Spillane has been given his 20 great things about the return of GAA and the lift that it can give the country. And Paul McGrath has been talking about no room for Paul Pogba in Solskjaer's plan. Graham Souness also writing about that in the papers today, that Manchester United need to find a way to try and fit Van de Beek, Pogba and Fernandes into the one team. Delighted to say that Rory and Mary have joined us now. How are we going, folks?
Hi, how are you doing?
Rory, it would seem wrong if I don't start with you, given your prominence as a rugby writer, given that I think about 40% of all the papers today are fallout from last night's game in Paris. There's a fairly common theme going through it, though, which is that Ireland were accused of being soft by Rassie Erasmus last year, but it probably wasn't their softness, but more, at times, a lack of invention and a clinical edge that seems to have caught them out.
It was more of a softness of mind, Will, I think. You know, it was decision-making, it was errors, it was mistakes. And it was just an inability to kind of live in the pressure cooker situation that was this kind of final game in Paris with the title on the line. And you know, we've had 20 months now of Ireland struggling in big games and making big mistake upon big mistake, and it was along that theme. I mean, it was an eminently winnable game for this Ireland team. They had loads and loads of chances. They spent 4 minutes and 25 seconds in the French 22 and didn't get the reward. And just France looked so dangerous when they had the ball. And you've loads of coverage. There was no journalists in Paris last night. We were doing everything remotely. Everyone was in their living rooms or their spare rooms, and we were dialing into press conferences from home. And we saw Sinead Kazan, get her questions being interpreted by the IRPU press officer on live TV. It was all very strange, and it feeds into the kind of strangeness of the day. I mean, we had an international in Parky Scarlets that looked like a pre-season friendly, and things did get better as it went on, but it's I think Stuart Barnes kind of sums it up, and he just said, without full houses in the grand old homes of European rugby, the game can look a scratchy old affair when the quality of the game and not the all-consuming atmosphere consumes or induces nervous sweats. It was a very strange Six Nations finale But I think the Ireland game did deliver for plenty of entertainment in the end.
Yeah, I suppose before we talk about Ireland, Rory, it probably wasn't the right stage for Alan Wynne-Jones to win his 149 cap between the Lions and Wales. That should have been a game, you would imagine, in Cardiff, and had things gone better for Wales before the lockdown, they might have been in contention to win the championship. It felt really like a damn squib, played at a club ground and played against a Scotland team who just about edged it in the end.
Yeah, like poor Alan Wynne-Jones, I mean, they could have spared him the indignity of playing his singing over the anthem. Like, he was like roaring it out passionately, and he hasn't got much of a note in his head, unfortunately, and things didn't get much better for him after that either. Yeah, like, it is what it is. We got to get on with sport behind closed doors. A couple of the GA games I watched haven't looked particularly great with the backdrop of an empty kind of monolithic concrete stadium. You know, it kind of exposes facilities sometimes, and you know, Parky Scarlets is a strange place. It's in the middle of an industrial estate outside Clonettley, which isn't the nicest spot in the first place. And yeah, it was a fairly inauspicious way. But you know, Alan Wynne-Jones will look back on his 140 odd caps, and he's had a lot better days than that. So he's got plenty of memories to call upon.
Mary, before we dig into the rugby, just on a more general point, how have you actually found this period now, as you mentioned, watching, say, a really big game last night, a Six Nations decider, with a massive open stadium in Saint Denis? We're watching the GA this weekend. On the screen just below where I can see you guys, I'm watching Leitrim against Mayo, and it feels very unusual seeing Carrick-on-Shannon being entirely empty. It is quite an unusual viewing experience currently, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And the only thing I can, I suppose, compare it to is way back when Croke Park was being redeveloped and playing in a Camogie Ireland final with the Cusack stand missing. And it's just a real surreal experience. And you feel for the players, because obviously they feed off the crowd. And last night, Judy Van Quillen asking Davy Fitzgerald about the lack of the Wexford support and did it affect the players and so on. So it absolutely has a role to play. But from a neutral's perspective and watching some of the team sports last night, and obviously as an Ireland fan, it's just fantastic to see the array of live sports that are out there now. Obviously, if you love sport, it's like, you know, after a really long torturous year of having no opportunity to watch live sport and looking at archival footage, to see live sport now the whole day yesterday, again today. But it is difficult for the players, be they amateur or professional. You know, you go out obviously to look after your own corner and win your own battle with your player and your respective number. But, you know, you want to play in front of a crowd. You want to feed off that energy. And that was very obvious last night from the Galway and Wexford crowd. You know, you could very much hear the fireworks going off overhead in Croke Park last night. But, you know, obviously, look, we're very lucky to have sport as we have it now. But I'm certainly enjoying it.
Yeah, and it was very unusual. Just looking at some of the sports file pictures of the Kilkenny team coming in ahead of their game against Dublin, and Colin Fennelly, you know, in an empty area around the dressing rooms in Croke Park, having to puck off a ball off a wall with his mask on and taking all these kind of precautions to make sure that things continue on. It is most unusual times. Rory, I suppose we will talk about the rugby now, but I'm just thinking, when we look through the newspapers today, something that stood out to me when I was reading them this morning is that live sports agenda, which Mary's just mentioned, with the amount of games this weekend. Probably feature pieces have become a little bit squeezed this Sunday, and really it's the live sport agenda that dominates across all the papers.
Yeah, it's the paradox of kind of, you know, having this much sport on. Like, I think some of the best sports writing we've had this year took place when there was no sport going on at all, because we all had to be really creative and get on the phones and try and come up with ideas and kind of use whatever contacts we had to try and fill space, whereas now the space fills itself. And like, you know, everyone's taking a different approach to it. You see some pieces from last night were filed before kickoff, even looking ahead. You know, I know in the Sunday Indo, I wrote the match report so that Brendan Fanning had more room to do a more analysis style piece to try and, you know, bring things on and shine some light as to why it happened rather than what happened. But it is hard to do sometimes when there's that much live sport. And even following it yesterday, you know, I would normally try and get to the Dublin hurlers when I can, but you know, I wasn't. You know, I was obviously keeping an eye on the rugby, but I had the radio on for the Dublin hurlers for a while. You know, I tuned into the last few minutes in Clonus because the drama that was happening on social media, it was far more entertaining than Wales and Scotland for a few minutes. But it was just so hard to keep track. You know, I wound down by watching Liverpool West Ham, which I didn't even realise had happened. You know, we're going to talk about Grandstand a little bit later on, but like the days when kind of the BBC could curate your sport for you, you're almost you know, looking back on that wistfully, like you're flicking onto Sky Sports Mix, back onto RT Radio, onto News Talk, then back to BBC, BBC 2 for the first half, BBC 1 for the second half. Like, it was just madness yesterday, and it's kind of reflected in the amount of live stuff that's on in the papers. But there's still some very good stuff on the match, which from a Sunday deadline point of view, I'm sure some of the listeners wouldn't be aware. Like, you're right up against it with an 8:05 kickoff. I don't know how the French did it. It was 9:05 over there.
How late can you actually file, Rory? Because I've always wondered about this. Sometimes you'd be kind of driving home on a Saturday night and you would see some of the kind of printing presses which are getting ready to go around about midnight, 1 o'clock. How late can you actually leave it?
Well, I filed on the whistle last night for my match report, so I've been scanning it to see what mistakes I made. But I see a few quotes in there, but there's not much from the Ireland camp. I know that I think I saw the Mirror had a few quotes off the telly. I mean, everything was done remotely anyway last night. But yeah, you're getting stuff in pretty much at full time. You're kind of hoping that the game is done and dusted early, which last night, unfortunately, it was looking pretty clear cut midway through the second half. But you can even see, if you read the match reports, there's a lot more detail in the first half stuff than there is in the second half. People get their work done at half time where they can and then fill in the blanks thereafter. And it does make analysis quite hard.
Well, that means some of the analysis that happened. I'll start with you, Rory, in this, because Shane McGrath is in the Irish Daily Mail today. If people want to have a look at page 85, Sexton vulnerable as overhaul looms. I'm assuming this wasn't written before the game finished to put any kind of idea that Jonathan Sexton could lose the captaincy. But where do we stand with this at this stage, Rory? I mean, this is obviously quite a strong line that Shane has taken, that perhaps an overhaul of players is needed now going into next year's Six Nations, and particularly that Andy Farrell might have a decision to make about Johnny Sexton's captaincy.
Yeah, and I would say Shane had a lot of this kind of prepped and done before he started, because there's not even really a mention of Sexton's reaction to being taken off. Peter Riley again had a piece looking forward where he kind of backs Sexton to be still there, that he's still the main man. And really the big problem Andy Farrell has with Johnny Sexton, if he did want to move on, is that there's no one really pushing to replace him, because Ross Byrne came on and didn't do particularly well. Now maybe Ross Byrne looked up the big screen and saw Johnny Sexton's reaction to coming off, and that wasn't exactly a vote of confidence in his abilities. But I think it will be a big focus in tomorrow's papers. I think there'll be a lot of analysis. I know I'll be writing about it. I mean, I thought it was very poorly judged to react to coming off the way he did. The camera lingered on him for 12 seconds, including a period where he looked up at the screen and realised he was on television.
I was just thinking, he'll have known that the camera was on him when he came off. It's inevitable.
Yeah, he looked up at the big screen and then looked back at the camera almost and shook his head again. He's the captain. He's responsible for the mood of the team in many ways, and his reaction sends a message about the guy who's coming on. It undermines the coach who's made the decision. And Andy Farrell's only 5 games in. He's still proving himself as a head coach. I don't think Sexton did anything for Andy Farrell last night. So he didn't play. He was by no means the worst player in the Ireland team last night. He pushed. His commitment is unquestioned. I don't think he's as good as he was 2 years ago when he was winning the World Player of the Year. I don't think it's outlandish to suggest that. He's still the best out half in Ireland, but he will be 37 at the next World Cup. And I think you don't want to write someone off based on their age alone, but when you see him behaving that way, when Ireland decide that he's not the man to close the game out for them, there is a question mark over whether he should be the captain. And I think James Ryan's performance, he was the one player Andy Farrell singled out as being the kind of physical leader, and he was the man that they left out there for 80 minutes. If you're looking towards 2023, which France clearly are doing, there's definitely an argument for pivoting towards James Ryan now and letting Johnny Sexton fight for his place and concentrate on being in the out half for Ireland for as long as he can be. But unfortunately, Joey Carberry's still kind of a footnote at the bottom of Munster press releases. He's not really a live contender, and there's no one else pushing. So I think the captaincy definitely is a live issue, and maybe, I don't know, does he get through the autumn and then make a change before the Six Nations? I'm not sure how you work that out, but it's going to be a big call whenever it comes. Yeah, and that is going to be a big story, I would imagine, tomorrow in the newspapers, when people have time to digest his comments after the game. We played some of them on the news round with Neil a little bit earlier. We're heading towards the news, so Mary, you hold your thoughts on Johnny Sexton for when we come back. We're also going to be talking about some really good Gaelic games writing today, including a lot of stats around the scoring in hurling, the weight of the slitter, and the way particularly that Limerick have changed their own physicality in terms of their size. Aaron Gillan was described as a choir boy back in 2017, very different now when he's their star forward. We'll be talking about all that just after the news at 2. I'll give you an update on the scores before we go to the break. Tipperary lead against Clare now in the Munster Senior Football quarter-final, early stages of the second half, by 1-6 to 5 points. In the Connacht Senior Football, Mayo have got themselves a goal. They now lead by 1-6 to 6 points against Leitrim. In Leinster, it is Longford 1-2, Louth 2 points.
Offaly 2 goals and 2 points, Carlow 5 points, Wexford 3 points, Wicklow 3. And in the Senior Football Championship quarter-final, the huge game at Ballybuffet, it is currently Tyrone leading against Donegal by 5 points to 1. We'll take a break for the news at 2.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
COVID-19 is affecting everyone.
2020 has been a year like no other.
As part of the Living with COVID plan, government and local authorities are working together to provide information and initiatives to support resilience and well-being across our communities.
Our focus must be to keep well, and we all need a little help at times. So let's start with you.
Here are 5 things to help you get through the next few weeks.
1. Keep active. It is important to mind your physical and mental health and well-being.
Even a brief daily walk is good.
2. Stay connected.
Isolation is a real problem, so reach out to your friends and family.
Ask for help if you need it, and offer help if you can.
3. Get creative.
Learn something new, get back to nature. Rediscover your own locality.
4. Eat well.
Make healthy choices to benefit your body and your mind.
5. Mind your mood.
If you are feeling anxious or stressed, help and resources are available to support your mental well-being.
For more information, go to gov.ie/Healthy Ireland.
Supported by the Government of Ireland.
When Halloween calls but shutters fall and lockdowns all around, Easy Living Interiors online sale is where bargains can still be found. No tricks, just treats on beds and suites. Slashed prices on tables and chairs. Supernatural leather sofas. Frightening value homewares. But don't delay. Order today for delivery to your door. Easy Living Interiors Halloween sale. See our wicked online store. EasyLivingInteriors.com. Sale ends Sunday.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Whatever your business needs, we have your van. The Opel Commercial Vehicles range gets the job done effectively, effortlessly, and with the efficiency of a pro. High-tech connectivity, high-volume payloads, and unrivaled comfort and safety. The Opel Commercial range suits any business. Discover more about the Movano, Vivaro, or Combo Cargo. Continental Tire's Irish Van of the Year 2020 at your local Opel dealer. We have your van. See opel.ie for details.
Life admin. Yep. It even sounds boring. No wonder it goes on the long finger. But when you do get round to it, a good place to start is by reviewing your mortgage. You really never know if there's a better option unless you look into it. That's where the Ulster Bank mortgage team could help. Wherever you bank, get in touch and find out about switching your mortgage to us. Just search Ulster Bank Switch. Ulster Bank. Help for what matters. Over 18s only. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Beacon Hospital would like to reassure our patients that we are committed to maintaining continuity of care during Level 5 restrictions. All our departments remain open and we will continue to treat patients with enhanced health and safety standards in place to keep you safe. Please be assured that we are here for you throughout this pandemic. Beacon Hospital, keeping you safe. For more information, visit beaconhospital.ie.
Antonio Dominguez is an ordinary man with an extraordinary talent. The fastest piano key hitter in the universe.
824 key hits in under 60 seconds.
Bravo, Antonio. Your obsession with speed has led to something extraordinary, and so has ours. Ireland's fastest broadband network has just got even faster. 1 gig broadband from Virgin Media, now available to 97.5% of our network. See virginmedia.ie. Virgin Media. Bring on amazing.
Subject to location and availability. T's and C's apply. Ireland's fastest broadband network based on analysis by Ookla of speed test intelligence data Q1 to Q2 2020. See virginmedia.ie/proof.
Generations of drama played out over 70 minutes. The GAA Hurling All-Ireland Championship, sponsored by Bord Gáis Energy, Centra and Littlewoods Ireland. Don't miss a moment of the action. Find out where you can watch the games on gaa.ie/fixtures and show your support from home using #BestSeatInTheHouse. GAA, where we all belong.
At Guaranteed Irish, we believe enterprise is at the heart of thriving communities.
Like Me to You, the nationwide multi-store gift card accepted in over 5,000 retailers, including Graham Thomas, Penny's, Lifestyle Sports, Tesco, and exclusively in Smith's Toys, Applegreen and Home Store and more. It's also the gift card of choice for many of Ireland's largest and best-known employers. So remember me2u.ie when rewarding staff this year, while also supporting Irish retail. Available online or in-store at Applegreen. So look out for it. Guaranteed Irish. Altogether better.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Adrian Harmon. The number of COVID-19 patients in intensive care has risen to its highest level since the end of May. 47 confirmed cases are receiving treatment in ICUs around the country. 6 people have been admitted to critical care beds in the last 24 hours, with 1 person discharged. Infectious disease professor Jack Lambert says vulnerable patients are in ICU because others have let their guard down.
Wearing a mask, not bringing in the community when you're a young adult, so you're not bringing it back home to your vulnerable grandmother or your vulnerable aunt or uncle who has, high risk indicators for COVID.
Gardaí and Carlow Town are investigating the unexplained death of a man in his 40s. Officers were alerted to a house at New Oak Estate shortly after 3:30am after he was found unresponsive by emergency services. He was treated at the scene but died a short time later. The man's body has been taken to the mortuary at University Hospital Waterford, where a post-mortem will take place. Gardaí say the results will determine the course of their investigation. A junior minister admits the Taoiseach could have done better in the way he communicated details of a confidential doctor's pay deal to a rival GP group. Yesterday, Leo Varadkar confirmed he gave the contract agreement with the Irish Medical Organisation to the President of the National Association of General Practitioners in April of 2019. But he says it was only shared after details were in the public domain and maintains there was nothing unlawful about it. The Taoiseach will address the issue in the Dáil on Tuesday and take questions on the controversy. Fine Gael Junior Minister Colin Brophy admits the informal way the contract was shared with the NAGP was not best practice.
It probably could have been done better in terms of communicating out. But the process of communicating out what was widely known from the 5th, 6th of April in terms of the deal is that you want as many GPs on board as possible.
Donald Trump's holding rallies in 5 different states today as part of a final weekend push ahead of Tuesday's US election. His rival Joe Biden, who's ahead in the polls, will hold just 2 events. Millions more Americans are voting by mail this time around, and with some states only starting to count on election day, it could mean a delayed result. But political columnist and law lecturer Larry Donnelly believes we should have an idea of who has won by Wednesday morning.
That's because of a couple of states that I think will tell us an awful lot. And because there are fairly sophisticated means of, I suppose, extrapolating from the trends that we're going to see.
It's 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For peace of mind, we provide cover for your valuables outside of the home, once they're specified on your home policy. Go online to the aa.ie.
Blustery today with heavy spells of rain in all areas, particularly in the southwest where there's a risk of local flooding. Highs of 10 to 15 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Welcome back to Off the Ball. On this Sunday afternoon, we are discussing the newspapers just to bring you up to speed on the scores before we delve into the rest of the back pages. Southampton are up to 3rd place in the Premier League after their 4-3 win against Aston Villa. Southampton were 4-1 up. Then a goal from Watkins from the penalty spot in the 93rd minute, and then Jack Grealish scored in the 97th to make it look like maybe Villa could pull off an unlikely comeback, but it finished 4-3 in Southampton's favour. Ward-Prowse scoring 2 of their goals in the first half. Meanwhile, Newcastle and Everton is underway. Everton need a win to go back to the top of the Premier League. It is goalless there after 5 minutes. Our live game coming up at 4:30 with Brian Kerr and Stephen Doyle is from Old Trafford, Manchester United against Arsenal, and the late kick-off is at 7:15, and that will see Spurs go up against Brighton. Brighton winning that fixture last season, and what was a big announcement performance really for Aaron Connolly. In the Munster Senior Football Championship quarter-final now, about 10 minutes into the second half, Tipperary lead Clare by 2 goals and 7 points to 5 points at Semple Stadium. In the Connacht Senior Football Championship quarter-final, latest score from Advance Card Park Sean McDermott in Carrick-on-Shannon. It's Mayo leading by a goal. Second half just underway. Mayo 1 goal and 6 points, Leitrim 6 points. points. In the Leinster Senior Football Championship, these games are about a minute now from half time. It is Longford 1 goal and 4 points, Louth 1 goal and 3. A meeting in the next round with Laois is the reward for the winners of that one. Kildare await the winners of the meeting of Offaly and Carlow. Offaly currently in front in Tullamore by 2-4 to 9 points. And at Wexford Park at the moment, Wexford lead against Wicklow. Wexford 6 points, Wicklow 1-2. Wicklow having won that fixture 2 weeks ago in the league to be promoted from Division 4. In the Ulster Football quarter-final between Donegal and Tyrone, Donegal have got themselves a goal and they're right back in the game now. It's Donegal actually gone ahead just there by 1 goal and 4 points to Tyrone's 5 points. And we've got Derry against Armagh at 4 p.m. also in the Ulster Football, and a 4 p.m. start in the Munster Senior Hurling Championship. That is Tipperary against Limerick. Mary, we were talking about Johnny Sexton just before we went to the break for the news, and on a kind of a wider point of the captaincy, we had that kind of 20-second period of seeing him shake his head, feeling frustrated. Earlier we heard his press conference piece where he said, look, anyone will be frustrated getting taken off in a big game. How would you feel if you looked across and saw your captain or teammate do that? Would it be disheartening for the player coming on and for players around them, or does it really matter that a player shows their frustration? I think we're just having an issue with Mary at the moment. I think he might be muted, so we'll get Mary back on in a second.
I think
there we go.
for you amateur professional player, if you're going to be taken off in a game, you're going to be upset by it, you know, and obviously cameras everywhere. You picked up on Johnny Sexton's reaction, but I can absolutely empathise with him. And from a wider point of view, like if you're coming onto the field, you're concentrating on your job at hand. You're not looking to see, well, how is the player being taken off reacting? You have a job to do. You have your own pride. You have a point to prove. You know, I watched the game last night. Obviously, you know, Johnny's 35 now. Conor Murray is 31. You know, you're looking ahead to the World Cup in 2023. Absolutely, you're going to have to start succession planning. You know, you need to give players time on the field. But rugby now is such a really collision sport. You're going to need to have 1 and 2 and 3 players as backup in positions. And, you know, there's a saying that time waits for no man. And, you know, Johnny has been a fantastic player for Ireland. And that's why I liked Peter O'Reilly's article today in the Times, because it was very balanced. You know, he spoke about not putting Johnny out to pasture. And I think, you know, we're less than 24 hours after the game. People have reacted and everybody's entitled to their opinion. And as someone once said to me, you know, it's easy to be a critic, and that's why there's so many of us. And that's very true. You know, Johnny will know himself, the Ireland rugby players will know themselves that they underperformed. Absolutely, I think, you know, the Nations Cup, in the Autumn Nations Cup coming up is a time to actually try players out and to give them meaningful game time at test level. You know, and I think that's the key for me going forward, is that they get meaningful game time. We need to look for players at 10, 11 and at 15 as well. We need to find these players. I thought James Ryan was exceptional again yesterday. His consistency in that position has been phenomenal for Ireland over the last number of years, and relatively still young. So what I'd like to do is separate the captaincy from the player. I think we absolutely still need the likes of Johnny Sexton. Do we need a captain to be on the field for the full 80? My view would be absolutely yes, we do. Then you look at James Ryan.
Yeah, Rory, that's an interesting point, because, you know, even towards the end of Brian O'Driscoll's career, when he was fighting against the burning of the light, the captaincy was taken away from him, maybe freed him up slightly where he was able to be the star player and to make the impact in the minutes he was on the field, but it took away that responsibility of being captain. Is that something that Andy Farrell might have to look at, or is this a very delicate decision to make coming into the next few months and next year's cycle now?
Yeah, I thought Brian O'Driscoll... Sorry, go on, Mary.
No, sorry, Workway. I just think from Andy Farrell's point of view, it absolutely is a number of delicate conversations he'll have to have. You know, look at Peter O'Mahony not starting yesterday, what's his viewpoint. But I also think that going forward, these types of conversations should be had now. So when we're having, you know, our post-mortem after the Autumn Nations, we're looking about, well, what did we find? What are the new opportunities out there? What are the new players coming through? Because, you know, 2023 isn't that far away. And, you know, as World Cups have proven it recently, you know, you need a really, really deep panel of players to be anyway successful at a World Cup.
Rory, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're completely right, Mary. Like, it's a unique window. You've got 4 internationals before Christmas. And really, like, this Six Nations was disjointed and weird, and after the World Cup, and it was, you know, it happened over 8 months, you know. I mean, finishing third is no, when you step back from it, finishing third when you have to go to Twickenham and Paris is pretty much, it's a decent result. You've top half finished. You can't, I wouldn't necessarily crib about that. I just don't know if Ireland hit the standards they expect to in Paris last night. But you look ahead, you've got 4 games now to build towards next spring. Forget the World Cup for a moment and think about the Six Nations in 2021, which should be now the next big goal. You now have 4 games to blood new players, to find combinations like that. And I think your point about, O'Driscoll, next time you have him in, ask him, like it's in his book, he wasn't happy to be stripped of the captaincy at that time. It wasn't a popular decision, but I mean, he was probably closer to his prime than Johnny Sexton is right now. We have to face up to the fact that he's going to be, I think I said 37 earlier, I think he'll actually be 38 at the next World Cup. And I think one of the big mistakes we made in the last World Cup cycle was Joe Schmidt nailed his colours to a player who was going to be too old at the World Cup, who was the right leader in 2016, but wasn't going to be the right leader in 2019. And I think Rory Best felt that as it went on as well, and felt the pressure, if you read his book, going into that World Cup. So I think Sexton still has a massive role to play. He's had his go at captain, but I don't think he's the captain for the long term. And I do think last night gives Andy Farrell an excuse to go and do it, I think. But I don't think he necessarily needed that excuse. I think he needs to pivot towards that now as well.
Mary, we'll pivot across from the rugby to the Gaelic games, because a lot of good writing about GAA in the papers today. And as Rory mentioned a little bit earlier on, Stuart Barnes said his piece today in the Sunday Times, where he spoke about kind of how unusual it felt after the restart to have empty stadiums, and he said the Six Nations was largely forgettable as a result. There's a lot of writing today about what teams are facing into on weekend 2 of the championship, and we might just move across to Liam Sheedy's interview with Philip Lanigan, which is on page 76 today of the Irish Mail on Sunday, and he brings up a lot of interesting points. He says, first of all, he wouldn't care if Tipperary go and lift the Liam McCarthy this year for a second year in a row and if Croke Park is absolutely empty. But he does mention the fact that he's longing for the idea of crowds to come back in, because he said in GAA in particular, there's such a connection between the community and the team that they're supporting that it is a great shame that these games are going ahead without crowds being there.
Yeah, really great article. I thought I really enjoyed it. I think, Gaelic games, your Indigenous sport being rooted in the community, everybody knows the players are going to play for their county, and the players absolutely feed off that, because you want to go out and represent your club and your community when you're playing into county at the highest level, but you also want to ensure that all the work that you put in behind the scenes, that you get reward for that. And the ultimate reward is to play in Croke Park on Ireland final day, and for the men in front of 80,000 people. And obviously now this year, it's obviously the term used unprecedented is overused at this stage. But I think from a playing point of view, the players are just very happy to be out there. I think the standard will grow week by week. I also think in the article, Liam refers to the fact that if a team had to withdraw because of COVID and being in contact and so on, that would devalue the championship. And I think he's right. We have to keep our fingers crossed that that teams are beaten fair and square on the field of play, rather than having to withdraw because of a situation that has been impacted by COVID. But looking ahead to today's game between Tipperary and Limerick, I think that the article alludes to that point about that pride in the parish, that where you're from and so on. And they'll know going out into that field today, both teams, there'll be a motivating factor that they're playing for the people where they come from, to give them a bit of a high for 70 minutes during today's game.
Mary, he responds to some of the kind of criticism that the GAA has faced over the last while. And I can understand in this pandemic, when people are looking for exemptions and exceptions, that they're always going to bat for their own sport. And as a result, there's this feeling that maybe there was exceptionalism for the GAA, that these amateur players were allowed to continue on with an elite status and play their championship. But Liam Sheedy is quick to point out in the article too, he says, I think the GAA have been really strong in the community throughout this, meaning the pandemic. He says, I think the GAA will come back bigger, fitter and stronger, which is the sub-headline within the piece too. He says they'll be there for the people. If we get the other side and got our games played and the crowds back, I think there remains in Ireland a massive appetite for Gaelic games. Given some of the celebrations which were highlighted after county finals, the GAA did come a little bit under fire. I think Liam Sheedy is somewhat coming to their defence today.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, you know, from a Gaelic Games point of view, the GA put out with the protocols, and, you know, you have to take personal responsibility, and clubs and individuals have to take personal responsibility around adhering to those protocols, not just in the run-up to games, but also post-match and celebrations and so on. And, you know, that's not for the GA to police. You know, when people go back to their communities, be they successful or not. But it's been well documented that sports volunteers across the country have been fantastic at, you know, reaching out to the vulnerable in the communities and supporting them. But I think what COVID has really shown in terms of Gaelic Games is how strong the club game is and how connected people are to their club game. And obviously now with the advent of live streaming of club games, that even strengthens that case. And also probably would have brought forward the argument around a closed inter-county season or a split season. I myself would prefer to see the club season going ahead where your majority of your players are, and then the county season come after that, for the simple reason being that, you know, for the most part, you're picked to play for your county based on how you perform for your club. Your club is where you're from, it's where you started, and it'll be where you go back to as well once you finish inter-county. So I think there's a lot of interesting things have come out of 2020. Obviously not all good, but I think in terms of Gaelic Games, you know, the condensing of the season will definitely help say the longevity of inter-county players' careers.
Yeah, spoke to two players this week who had similar enough opinions after their first experience of being with their club for a prolonged period of time. An interview that's going to be coming up this week on Up Close and Personal with Gillette here on Off the Ball. Donncha Walsh was speaking to his wife, Louise Galvin, for us ahead of next week, and he mentioned the fact that he's from a small rural community in Kerry. He barely saw his club mates when he was playing for Kerry. He would go back, play a couple of championship games and wouldn't see them until the next summer. And he has really enjoyed the last year and a bit since he retired, where he's had a chance to actually give something back. And he says he feels a certain amount of loyalty, even though he has to travel from Dublin back down to West Kerry to play games. But he says he feels he owes it to his club mates, who he wasn't always there for at the time with Kerry. And also Cillian O'Connor, I spoke to the Mayo forward during the week, and he made the point this is the first year he's had a prolonged run with the club, and he's now a supporter of the idea of a split season because it made such a difference having himself and his brother back with the club mates, and he felt he wasn't robbing a jersey from someone else by coming back for championship. So I'm sure that discussion will run and run. Rory, we've got a piece just across from Liam Sheedy with Michael Clifford's interview with Stephen Rochford. Now, Stephen Rochford was doing the rounds during the week, so he's made a few of the Sunday papers, but I pick up on this interview with Michael Clifford because it's interesting to get a coach's perspective on how things are in COVID-19, particularly with Rochford being a coach with Donegal, who were a team that had to stand down for a period when the lockdown happened initially in Donegal because they had positive cases in their panel. And it's interesting to read in this piece how different it's been for them trying to prepare a team. And he talked a bit about the psychology of trying to build up a bit of a buzz in training, which is hard to do because of the protocols and everyone being split up.
Yeah, I guess that's the challenge for coaches. You know, they even he says they can't do as much video analysis as they used to be able to do, or they normally would be able to do in a season. And you'd hope that maybe leads to a more open championship and more open games, that teams haven't second-guessed each other to the nth degree, that maybe that they haven't been kind of figuring out each other's attacking systems and all of that, and we might see a bit more space. So yeah, no, the fact that they don't have a dressing room, you know, that, like, I think I heard, you know, Kerry drove up to Monaghan a couple of weeks ago in individual sponsored cars, one after another. You know, the challenge for sports from a preparation point of view. I mean, how do you get out of a car after driving that long and then go out and play 70 minutes of intense football? You know, I think it's going to challenge the team the people who prepare the teams almost as much as it challenges the people playing the games, and that should make life more interesting for those of us watching at home. Yeah, I think the more we hear about that, it's going to be more and more interesting, because they're not in that kind of bubble, another overused phrase that we're hearing a lot about at the moment. But like, the Irish team are basically, once they have a little break this time, on Thursday they go into a bubble for 31 days where they're not going to see anyone outside of their teammates and stuff, which is a challenge in itself. Whereas the GA players are going to work, they're going back to their families, and they're living fairly normal lives while also living this parallel universe where they're elite sports people who are allowed to traverse county borders and go outside their 5K, which the rest of us can't do. So it's a very interesting dynamic to it all. And I think the more we hear about it, the more, you know, like, we're seeing how behind closed door sports has led to some crazy scorelines in sports elsewhere. We're seeing in hurling, we're seeing big scorelines. You know, there's definitely, this is a very unusual ecosystem that sport has been played in, and that's just one element of it.
Mary, something that comes up in Stephen Rochford's comments too, which probably have wider implications for sports people, particularly those who are trying to juggle work with being an athlete at the same time, is that he pointed out that they've had to go to Zoom and Skype and other alternatives where they haven't been able to meet as often. But he speaks about the fact that that's been able to enable the players to claw back a lot of the time that they give as part of the commitment, because they're not having to travel to one specific area to be there for a video session. Now they can use technology to send on analysis and to make contact with players. And for players who give up a lot of hours during the week, if they're an amateur playing sport at a decent level, maybe this might be one good thing that comes out of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one thing that struck me. I think, we use technology in terms of wearable technology when players are playing games, tracking them and so on. I think this is an opportunity now to really reset for an inter-county player. He speaks about the size of Donegal in the article, and some players travelling 2 hours, to go to training and 2 hours home afterwards. And if you're travelling 2 hours just for a team meeting, that kind of stuff is energy sapping, especially when the individuals have maybe family commitments, work commitments. I think it's definitely something that's going to be utilised even further in 2021. And I think a lot of the inter-county players will be glad to see that. I think inter-county players who definitely have been around for maybe 8 to 10 years, who are probably going towards the veteran stage of their careers, would really be excited by the opportunity maybe not to have to sit into that car that 4th or 5th night just to go to a meeting or to do video analysis and so on. It was interesting actually earlier this year when Ballymun won the Dublin Club Championship, that the players themselves focused that that they wanted to focus more on just actually training rather than doing team meetings and video analysis. They wanted to bring back in the fun elements, and I think recently watching the likes of Tyrone play football with Conor McKenna coming back in, he really seems to have brought this bit of flair, playing with a bit of risk, which isn't something that Tyrone would be known for. But I think it's an exciting time off the field for intercounty, and I think a lot of backroom teams now will be looking at how can we actually maximise this as an opportunity for our players.
Yeah, well, they say
there has to be a balance to it as well. I said there'll be some managers who be flooding WhatsApp groups with clips and schedule meetings at all times of the day, and I guess a lot of the players are probably sitting here like we are now on Zoom staring at screens all day, and playing football or playing hurling is their break. So there's a management challenge there for coaches as well, not to completely bombard, because I'm sure there's some managers who are calling Microsoft Teams calls and all sorts of things at the wrong times and impinging on players' private lives as well.
Yeah, I can only imagine for players. It's bad enough for us journalists having to sit in on press conferences and checking if the washing up is done in the background in case someone sees you or end up in the news. But in terms of Gaelic games, there's some other very good writing pieces, and I'm just going to flick through to the middle of the Sunday Times here, because two pieces really kind of caught my attention earlier on, guys. Both of them are by Dennis Walsh, and in many ways they're kind of complementary to each other. But the first one that kind of jumped out for me was on page 10, Mary, which is Big is Beautiful in Limerick. And I like the graphics that they've used about the average size of players in 2015 compared to 2020. And basically, it's a case of maybe this is why Limerick have been so good over the last couple of years. The point is made about really how it's not even just the average, but it's what's needed now to be an inter-county hurler by comparison to times gone by. So last week when they played against Clare, at least 12 of their players who started the game were at least 6 foot tall. 7 of them were 6'2" or taller, and they were averaging over 15 stone in weight, which is all lean muscle with what they were playing with as well. The idea being that once upon a time, smaller players played in hurling and they moved around the pitch. But nowadays, if you're going to go up against a team like Limerick, you're going to have to be competing with them in the gym as much as you're competing with them in the ball striking skills in the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, from my point of view, you've watched it evolve over the last decade. S&C, some teams have got it right and some teams have got it wrong. We must always remember that hurling in particular is a very technical sport. It's about wrists, and some players turned into refrigerators at times and couldn't hurl as much as they could. But I think this article, what he's talking about is how Limerick have married the natural physicality of the players that are just a natural occurrence with these lads that have come through, a lot of them 6'1". They've married that with the S&C side of the house, and how important that has been in terms of adding to their technical proficiency, which they obviously have. There's a great line in the article that says, "For the business of winning hurling matches, it would be worthless without their technical proficiency and their tactical smartness, but it's the frame that holds the painting."
Yeah.
And he's so right. Even you watched last night between Galway and Wexford, Wexford really physical specimens of men. You know, Galway just moving their feet, smart, but in the tackling was ferocious last night between Wexford and Galway, and it just shows that you must have the ability to ride those tackles and actually to endure them, and obviously then make the right decision once you have the ball in your hand.
Yeah, and Dennis has leaned on some of the stats from Brian McDonald here, and his website is well worth a check out too. It is 6242.com is Brian's site. It's been getting a lot of love in the last week because he did a particular deep dive on last year's championship 2019, but very telling about Limerick, because you might wonder what's the difference in terms of this muscle. Well, they're able to put it to use on the pitch. So Limerick last year created more shots from turnovers than any other team, and on the other side of the ball they were able to protect possession and had the best hand passing statistics. So they were able to keep the ball in the middle third, and when they pushed up on teams further up, they were able to create turnovers. Rory, one of the points that's kind of made within this article too, because it's Jim Quilty who's worked extensively with John Kiley, who's been giving some information to Dennis Walsh on the process there's been in Limerick over the last 6 or 7 years since these players were coming through at under 14 and 15 development squads, is that Limerick have clearly put together quite an organised plan. This sounds almost like a professional sports academy where they've been assessing their players since they were 14 or 15 years of age, and they've put a lot of focus into their strength and conditioning over that period.
Yeah, and like, you know, I always could kind of bring it back to my own world. Munster currently have one Limerick player in their entire academy, and I think if you do a deep dive into what's the reason behind all of that, part of it is that Limerick hurling is really attractive right now to young lads playing in Limerick. I mean, there's been definitely a knock-on effect. There's more players from West Cork playing for Limerick or for Munster at the moment than there are from the traditional heartland of Limerick. So they're doing something very, very right. They've obviously got good funding behind them. But yeah, it's an interesting piece in terms of the kind of way they've built these athletes and the fact that, you know, the science behind it and what they're looking for from them as well. Because I think there's a quote in there about, you know, you can put on muscle mass pretty quickly, but, you know, you can't build athleticism in the same way. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, the mistakes that have been made maybe over the last 20 years in football, in rugby, you know, we all remember the 07 World Cup and how Ireland looked like Superman but didn't play like it. You know, they've probably learned lots of lessons from all of that, and they've kind of built for hurling athletes. I mean, it's very interesting to see. And then there's the science of the other piece then about the sliotar below it. It's kind of a very interesting approach to the sport.
Yeah, so that's, if you want to read that is on page 11 of the Sunday Times today. It's Dennis Walsh's piece. We're going to take a very short break in a moment. I'll give you an update on the scores, but we'll talk about, ahead of that big hurling game between Limerick and Tipperary, just the whole new ball game in terms of the amount of scores. They've been breaking down the stats as well in Dennis's complimentary piece to Limerick, which is about the average scoring after we saw Limerick last week against Clare. But just to get you up to speed on what's happening at the moment, Tipperary against Clare in the football. Now, Tipperary lead by 2-9 to 9 points. That game's got about 5 minutes to go. It was a 1 p.m. throw-in. Mayo lead by 2 goals against Leitrim in the Connacht Senior Football Championship quarter-final. 2 goals and 9 points to 9 points. In Leinster, these games are now about to start in the second half. It is Longford who lead by a single point against Louth, 1-5 to 1-4. Offaly 2 goals up in their game against Carlow. It's 2 goals and 6 points, 2-6 to 8 points now for Offaly against Carlow. Wicklow against Wexford is currently Wexford 8 points, Wicklow 1-3. In the Ulster quarter-final between Donegal and Tyrone, Donegal lead by 1-5 to 6 points. That's the latest scores in the Gaelic games currently. And in the Premier League across Channel, it's Newcastle 0, Everton 0. The early kick-off was a 4-3 victory for Southampton away to Aston Villa. We'll take a short break. We'll talk about a huge interview with Marco van Basten and also about the sliotar when we come back after these.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
This week on the Home Show podcast, architect and TV presenter Dermot Bannon on what really makes incredible homes. 50 Shades of Grey, but how to know which one will get you hot under the collar. To stuff or not to stuff, is taxidermy making a comeback?
The Home Show with Sinead Ryan.
Listen to the podcast now at newstalk.com and on the Newstalk app.
Whatever you want in a van, high spec, high tech, comfort, capacity or fuel economy, choose a Peugeot from our award-winning range. More than ever in these challenging times, it's good to know you've got a van that really delivers. The Expert, the Boxer and the Peugeot Partner, Ireland's best-selling van and Irish Van of the Year 2020. All available with surprisingly competitive offers. Visit Peugeot.ie for more.
Afternoons are easy with insuremyvan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit insuremyvan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as insuremyvan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
What are you doing?
Just adding some light to my home office.
All right, Dermot. Well, step away before you do any more damage.
Improving your home? Want to spend less on a loan? Avantcard offers their lowest ever rate on loans over €20,000. I know what I'm doing.
Apply today at avantcard.ie. Lending criteria, T's and C's apply. New applications only. Info correct 1st October 2020. Source ccpc.ie. Avantcard Act rating as Avantcard is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Beacon Hospital would like to reassure our patients that we are committed to maintaining continuity of care during Level 5 restrictions. All our departments remain open and we will continue to treat patients with enhanced health and safety standards in place to keep you safe. Please be assured that we are here for you throughout this pandemic. Beacon Hospital, keeping you safe. For more information, visit beaconhospital.ie.
Since 2000, Ireland's domain registry.ie has helped put Irish businesses and communities on the world stage with the uniquely Irish.ie identity and online address. We've helped businesses and people to start and to thrive online. To celebrate 20 years of Irish success online, .ie is giving away €20,000. All you need is to have an active .ie website. If you do, simply visit weare.ie to enter the draw. T's and C's apply. That's weare.ie. .ie. We are Ireland Online.
Are you a British citizen living in Ireland? The UK has left the EU, and from the 1st of January 2021, there may be changes that affect you. If you drive in Ireland, you need to exchange your UK driving licence for a local one. There will also be new requirements for travel to the rest of the EU. Check online that your passport is valid, and renew it if you need to. Find all the information you need at gov.uk/living in Ireland.
Right now, it's even more important that we all pull together to keep the country safe. And at SuperValue, we'll keep doing all we can too. By having more online shop delivery slots and having our aisles and shelves stocked, sanitising stations ready and priority shopping times for elderly or vulnerable customers. At SuperValue, we're there for you.
The seasons change, but the championship doesn't. The posts never get any wider, the hits never get any softer, and the pain doesn't hurt any less. There's still only one ball, only one pitch, only one Sam. It's still winner takes all down to this. The championship never gets easier, but the tougher it gets, the stronger we become. AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA All-Ireland Senior Football Championship.
Barry John Crow is an ordinary man with an extraordinary talent. The fastest sausage tire on the planet.
78 sausages in under a minute.
Bravo, Barry John Crow. Your obsession with speed has led to something extraordinary, and so has ours. Ireland's fastest broadband network has just got even faster. 1 gig broadband from Virgin Media, now available to 97.5% of our network. See virginmedia.ie. Virgin Media. Bring on amazing.
Subject to location and availability, T's and C's apply. Ireland's fastest broadband network based on analysis by Ookla of speed test intelligence data Q1 to Q2 2020. See virginmedia.ie/proof.
When Halloween calls but shutters fall and lockdowns all around, Easy Living Interiors online sale is where bargains can still be found. No tricks, just treats on beds and suites. Slashed prices on tables and chairs. Supernatural leather sofas. Frightening value homewares. But don't delay. Order today for delivery to your door. Easy Living Interiors Halloween sale. See our wicked online store. EasyLivingInteriors.com. Sale ends Sunday.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Welcome back to our Sunday newspaper review. Before we go through the rest of the sports writing from this weekend, just to bring you up to speed on what's happening currently. Almost half-time in the Liberty Insurance All-Ireland Senior Camogie Championship. The reigning All-Ireland champions Galway in control against Offaly in the last minute of the first half. It is Galway 1 goal and 10 points, Offaly 1 point. In the Gaelic games currently, it looks like Tipperary are heading towards victory. Closing stages against Clare in their quarter-final in the Munster Football Championship. The winners will play against Limerick. It's Tipperary 2-11, Clare 9 points. In the Connacht Senior Football Championship quarter-final, Mayo lead by 2 goals against Leitrim, 2 goals and 9 points to 9 points. Second half's back underway in the Gaelic football in Leinster. These are first-round games in the senior football. It's Longford who lead away to Louth now by 1-6 to 1-5. Offaly 2 goals and 7 points, Carlow 9 points. And it's Wexford who narrowly lead against Wicklow. Wexford 9 points, Wicklow 1 goal and 4. And in the big game in Ulster at Ballybuffet, straight knockout this year, so whoever's beaten won't get a second chance. It's Donegal 1 goal and 5 points, Tyrone 6 points. Well, in the Premier League, it remains scoreless after half an hour between Newcastle and Everton. We are joined currently to have a look at the papers by Mary O'Connor, who's the Federation of Irish Sport CEO and also rugby writer with the Irish Independent, Rory O'Connor. Mary, I might just take you from our discussion of Dennis Walsh's piece about the change in physicality of players in hurling to what's been happening with the average scoring, which has been going up. Because last weekend, as highlighted by Dennis, particularly when we look at the Limerick against Clare game, we had a shot every minute of the game. It actually went over every minute. So 81 shots were taken in 80 minutes in that game. And it's not a one-off. This isn't an anomaly at all. They've been looking at the average points per game. Back in 1994, it took basically, you'd have to score 13 or 14 scores to win a game. 27 was the average back then. Now the teams are averaging 43 scores. And the overall points in the championship season, even since 2016, where we had 28 games, 1,043 compared to 2019, over 200 more points hit and just one more game, so 1,242. Whether by technology or whether by strength and conditioning or whether by tactics, it's very clear that shooting on sight is becoming more prevalent, Mary, in hurling than it was before. Yeah, absolutely. If you watched the games last night, two of the Galway's full back line were scoring from play. Hugh Lawler, the Kilkenny fullback, ended up scoring the winning point for Kilkenny. So the game is evolving. Obviously, strength and conditioning is definitely playing its role as well. You see Joe Canning and Lee Chin going back to their own 65s last night and stroking the ball over the bar. There's an interesting point in it where Siobhan Matthews, who's a chemical and mechanical engineer, speaks about the difference in the weight of the slitter and the impact on how far the ball will travel. So in the GA, there's the minimum weight of the slitter of being 110 grams and the maximum being no more than 120. But what she says is that there is an 8% difference in potential difference. There's an 8% difference in potential distance between the lightest ball and the heaviest ball in the GA's approved spectrum. So that's massive. You talk about percentages, but 8 percentages. So, you've got a player who could strike the ball over the bar with the lighter slitter, but if he is striking the heavier slitter, that ball could land in the square, and it could be the difference, as Bowl O'Dwyer found out 6 or 7 years ago playing for Tipperary, between winning on All-Ireland and losing on All-Ireland. So it's a massive piece of research. But like when the slitter changed recently from white to yellow, and it just shows that every piece of the game now is being looked at. But I do think that it's not just a slitter. I think absolutely it's S&C, but definitely tactics. When you've got backs in some instances outscoring their forward counterparts. Yeah, Patrick Horgan was asked recently enough about Babs Keating's suggestion, which was that the ball should be made heavier, Mary. But his response was that with the strength of forwards at the moment, he reckons that he would be easily able to out-hit distance-wise the players from the 1970s and 80s when the ball was that bit heavier. And there probably is an amount of truth in that. He's saying that they've got a much faster speed of swing nowadays. They've got more muscle mass now than the players would have had back then. So it's very clear that even if the ball is made a little bit heavier, these players are still going to puck it quite a distance. Absolutely. And there's so much science behind the game now as well, as I said already, but also the way the players are playing the game. They can move from... Again, listening to Dave Fitzgerald last night, he said he tried 4 different formations last night. So they're going from playing close touch hurling to long distance striking, So I agree with that. I think, it's just something that we're going to have to, I suppose, put up with for the most part. I watched the games last night and there seemed to be an awful lot of space where normally possibly there wasn't before. But that's down to the physical prowess of these players, their fitness and so on. I'd much rather go to a game and see a high scoring than a very close and, contested affair where there's not high scoring, What do you think, Rory? Are scores overrated?
Sometimes. If it's just a flurry of points from long range, I think it can dilute from the spectacle. I like hurling, but I wouldn't be the biggest hurling fan. You know, I would try and get to games when I can during the summer, but obviously I don't get to as many as I like. And I do find sometimes it can pass me by because it's just a flurry of just score after score after score, and you almost go away. It's a bit like basketball sometimes. You're better off tuning in for the last 10-15 minutes to see if it's close. It's interesting to, like, I wouldn't have really known about the weight of the ball, you know, what the parameters were that they're working under. You know, how would increasing the weight affect it? Would it, you know, favour more negative teams and more blanket, you know, the more, you know, putting more sweepers behind it? It is a sport that's against the kind of traditionalists, is becoming more and more tactical as we go. So it's an interesting perspective on it, and one I hadn't really considered before. But I do think, yeah, there is a danger in just having, as he says himself, rat-a-tat-tat, that it's just score after score after score. I think you do need a bit of kind of, I don't know, game strategy in there as well, and a kind of a bit more of a battle. And also there's less goals than there used to be as well, as from what I can tell, and that does reduce a bit of the kind of drama and excitement that kind of was so attractive about it in the first place.
Yeah, I think basketball is a good analogy to use. Once upon a time, a few years ago, probably 5-6 years ago, 3-point shooters started to come to the fore in basketball, and going up to the post and scoring slam dunks kind of went to one side because teams worked out it was better to have a percentage shot more often than not be taking shots, and definitely in hurling that seems to be the case. Mary, I'm going to take you across to the Mail on Sunday. The Irish edition of it and the English edition are both carrying this very interesting and very lengthy interview with Marco van Basten, you know, Holland's great hero of the 1988 European Championships, and quite a remarkable story that he's given to Ollie Holt here, because Van Basten is one of those players who maybe with modern medicine would have been able to play on a bit longer than he was. And also he gives incredible depth and detail about his life in this piece. I think Ollie has captured it really well.
Yeah, it's a really excellent article. You know, being a child of the 90s, you know, really admired Van Basten as a player, but you know, his story it's harsh, and as somebody who was so talented, you know, the article alludes to the fact that he won the Ballon d'Or 3 times. He was voted the FIFA World Player of the Year in 1992, but by 1993, at age 28, he had to retire due to a succession of ankle injuries, you know. And the article goes on to speak about how he has come to terms with his shortened career and how he looks on with, I suppose, envy and respect at Ronaldo and Messi, and how that wasn't afforded to him and how he's trying to make peace with that. He also goes back to the fact that, you know, it was bad medical advice and, for want of a better phrase, botched jobs medically that ended his career, that he didn't get good advice around. And his ankle, he speaks about, you know, his injury being so poor that he had to pull himself across the floor on his stomach to go to the bathroom because of the pain in his ankle, and he couldn't walk. He speaks about his childhood friend dying in front of him by slipping through the ice as a 7-year-old, and how that has affected him. He seems very much as a man that's spent, you know, his last 30 years since he's retired trying to come to terms with his very short soccer career. Although obviously a fantastic player and achieved so much in that time frame, he felt that he had more work to do and more enjoyment to have. But, you know, the article ends with him, you know, speaking about the things that he has in his life, his wife, his kids and his grandchildren and so on. But I definitely think for him, you know, it's been a struggle to get to that point. I think as an biography, it'll be an excellent read for people who were probably followed his career and wondered what happened to him and what battles he had faced since the camera went away from him. And there's a really brilliant piece in the article where he speaks about, you know, the last time he went out in front of the Milan crowd, and he kind of states that was his football funeral. They were giving him ovation. There were people openly weeping. Fabio Capello was weeping in the dugout as a manager of Milan that this great player was no longer going to play. And he said it took till then for him to realise that they're crying for him, that it's his football funeral, as he says it. And, you know, it's a really, really excellent article. Yeah,
like what really strikes me here, Rory, well, the image that really struck me was he gets this bad medical advice, a couple of bad times when he goes under the knife. He's in extreme pain after he's forced to retire. And it's him having to cling on to the toilet, which he's pulled himself to on his knees to get there in the middle of the night. And sometimes we kind of think when a player is forced to retire early, we think, look, they just rehab from that injury and life is normal. But it's very clear that Van Basten had to go through terrible pain even after he retired.
Yeah, it's quite a visceral image, isn't it? And life, they don't have normal lives in the first place. You know, they've lived in this kind of bubble for their entire existence. I mean, even the childhood friend who died, he talks about how good a footballer he was, that this kid was a better player than him at 7, you know, that that he had to be, his father ripped up the photograph of his friend a couple of years after he died because he was afraid that Marco would be haunted by it, that he couldn't let go of that image of his hat floating in the water as he ran to get help for his friend who was gone under the ice. I mean, it's just what a harrowing thing to have to go through. So, what was Marco van Basten's life like? What was it like when he retired? What was he looking at as he stood in that pitch? Everything he knew about life was gone, and he was basically, as he says, at what is his own funeral. And I mean, it's really interesting. He's a player that obviously is part of your consciousness as some of my age anyway, growing up and watching him. But I wouldn't have known an awful lot about him, and he's kind of become one of these figures who stands at FIFA draws and draws out the balls with a kind of a polished smile. I wouldn't have known that the story is behind them, and it's really, I love when you get an insight into someone like that. And I also love the fact that the Mail have done this old school graphic of his greatest goal, which reminds me of the World Cup 90 album that I think is behind you somewhere, Will.
Yeah.
I'm sure if the online article has an embedded YouTube clip, and I'm sure I could look it up in 2 seconds, but to see the arrows as to where the ball fell, it just takes me back to my childhood. And, that's where Marco van Basten lives, in my head.
Yeah, quite beautiful. It is an image in the top right-hand corner of the newspaper. I think in the online, I'm not sure they've actually got this graphic because I read this first last night when Ollie Holt tweeted himself, but you can see what Rory's speaking about there in the top right-hand corner. So you can see Van Basten ghosting in from the right wing for that famous volley in the European Championships, and then the cross from Arnold Moran, which found him still a lot to do from the position he was in, and one of the most remarkable volleys that we've ever seen, as sweet as you will ever see. He talks a little bit around the book too about Donny van de Beek, who's moved to Manchester United, but what I did like, Mary, is he seems to keep in touch with the modern game, and he likes players who aren't too dissimilar to him. He picked his favourite players, Kylian Mbappe, Robert Lewandowski, Messi and Ronaldo. Very clear that Van Basten stays as a guy who loves goals.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was actually intrigued by his honesty around management and how management he felt didn't suit him, that he couldn't influence the way he could as a player, and how he kind of have left the management scene. But, absolutely the players he's mentioned there, I suppose he kind of looks at them and thinks of maybe what could have been for me as well, Obviously he was 2 generations before the likes of Mbappe, but, Van Basten is like all fantastic footballers and real legend of the game, and I just don't think he will resonate with the likes of Rory and me in terms of our generation. I think if you talk about brilliant players of the last 40-50 years in football, he's going to be up there. He was iconic, and he was really, really consistent as well. And the fact that his career ended at 28 is actually devastating for those of us who like to be entertained by sport, because he was so genuinely brilliant to watch.
Rory, I'll take you to the back page of the Sunday Independent today, because we mentioned at the outset that Eamon Sweeney's got a couple of pieces. Before we talk about Grandstand, I want to ask you about the fact that Eamon's given kind of a third of the back page to this 18th League of Ireland title, which has been landed by Shamrock Rovers. I know Johnny Ward, when he was on the pay-per-view not too long ago, was bemoaning the fact that there was very little League of Ireland coverage on a lot of the weekends, but Eamon Sweeney is saluting the long-term vision of Shamrock Rovers here on the back page.
Yeah, and as a Bohemians fan, it pains me to talk about it really, but they won it last Saturday night, which, because Bows lost to Finn Harp, surprisingly, and that meant that on Sunday's papers there was really very little about it because no one was ready for it. And, all the spaces allocated and all that sort of stuff. And Johnny was making the point last Sunday that really the achievement deserved a lot more. And he's right. And even the fact that a week later there's only just this one piece across the papers in it, just reflective of how much is going on in the world right now. And, Rovers haven't even played since they haven't lifted the trophy because Derry City had a COVID outbreak. But he makes the point, he starts off with this episode of The Twilight Zone where a man in 2011 here's odds of Paddy Power offering odds that Rovers were going to win 10 in a row, and he wakes up he goes into a coma and wakes up this year, and he wonders how his bets got on. They haven't won it since, because they did look like they could be a dynasty back then, and right now they look set up to really dominate the league and to dominate Irish football for a long time to come. They've really got a good setup under Stephen McPhail and Stephen Bradley, and they have Dermot Desmond's backing behind them as well financially, so they're really well set up. And Dundalk's off-field struggles have been well documented, despite the fact they were playing Arsenal this week. Their off-field chaos really has been quite apparent all this season. And then Bows are the next best thing, but they're way off in terms of resources from where Rovers are right now. So it's just an interesting look at it. He as the Sligo Rovers fan that he is, he refers to them as shams throughout. So while he's praising them, he's also annoying them.
Never say Rovers. Yeah.
No, and they hate that. So that's always good. So it's good to see them get the recognition, because I think their achievement, despite it being a curtailed season, is worthy of it. And I do think they're going to be around for an awful long time. And because they have the facility in Tala, I think that they can be the standard bearers for the league, much as it pains me to say it.
Mary, moving slightly up that same back page with Eamon Sweeney. Hold the back page, of course, is his piece at the back of the Sunday Independent each week. We've got the picture of the legendary broadcaster and a very innovative broadcaster in Frank Boff, who was involved not just in terms of Grandstand, which we're going to talk about, but also Breakfast TV across the channel in the UK. Very much a pioneer broadcaster. He sadly passed away this week. But just reading Eamon's piece earlier today, it brought back those memories of sitting down on a Saturday afternoon and watching Grandstand, which was like a pick and mix of everything. You weren't stuck down watching one sport at any given time. It could flash between athletics to a big meeting somewhere, to some live football. And in many ways, for those of us who were growing up, that was probably the way we consumed sport on the Saturday, was getting a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it absolutely influenced me in growing up, in terms of actually falling in love with all types of sport, and really kind of, I suppose, motivating me to find out more about these sports. It was so diverse, from rally driving to boxing to athletics, to basketball, because for me, growing up in rural Ireland, you had Gaelic games and that was it. So this gave me a new appetite for all types of sport. And he refers to Sports Stadium as well, and that was another favourite of mine. And like sort of Brendan O'Reilly presenting that, and we were kind of, in innocent times, it was our gateway to another universe in terms of all the different sports that are out there. But Grandstand stood the test of time, as did Sports Stadium, and it brings you back. It kind of gives you nostalgia, but part of me is thankful that I got the opportunities to watch those shows as a young girl, because obviously it was kind of the male spectrum of sports was covering, but also gave me an opportunity to say, well, like, I like sport, but I have an opportunity to see all this diverse range. And only for shows like that, I definitely wouldn't have heard of the likes of Billy Coleman and rally driving, for instance, and so on. So, it's a really good article, really enjoyable. I think there's a lot of people in the country today that would read that article and be having a lot of nostalgia in their thinking.
Yeah, Rory, I suppose there were different times, and it was a time when, say, RTÉ and the BBC didn't have to worry about sports going behind paywalls, and sometimes the coverage, I remember reading stories about tapes that were being run to RTÉ from an event that was quite close to Dublin to try and make sure that it got on to Saturday Sport on a Saturday afternoon. But this just goes to show, back in probably those less regulated days when things weren't moving for big money, you genuinely got a smorgasbord of everything on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I was more the Bob Wilson generation than Frank Bock, who was kind of had to resign in disgrace after News of the World allegations, which was kind of the twist in the tail of all the reports about him last week, which I actually hadn't heard of him before. But Grandstand, yeah, I do think that it's reflective of the analog world that I grew up in, and I think it did expose you to a load of sports that maybe kids now might not. If you're into the Premier League, you can just watch Premier League all day. You don't have to. You won't have it, it won't break for the racing. It won't break for the flash the National Boxing Championships or show the highlights from the previous night. And I mean, it's all there on YouTube. Everything's available to you if you want to get it, but it's all available for you to curate it yourself. Whereas back then it was up to a BBC director to tell you what you were going to watch, and it gave it quite a wide view of things. But then nowadays you can pretty much get everything you wanted to click a button. So if you just want to watch hurling and football, you just get your GAA Go subscription, and that's all you want to watch. You don't need to watch the Six Nations and stuff. It's a very different landscape. I'm not sure which one is better or worse, but I am glad that I had the exposure to the different sports the Grandstand and Sports Stadium allowed me to have, because it gives you a good general love of each one, even though sometimes you're watching rally driving and wondering what you're doing with your life.
Yeah, I suppose, Mary, on a final note in terms of this, when we think about coverage around sport, it's fantastic at the moment. There's all the live streaming, as Rory mentioned. You can put YouTube on and watch things at once upon a time, particularly before this pandemic, that wouldn't have been shown. But it's also very important to remember the power of terrestrial TV. I even remember the Irish women's hockey team a couple of years ago were mentioning about how important it was that RTÉ were showing their quarter-final and semi-final at the Hockey World Championships, because they were getting to a market who didn't have to seek them out, that it was there where people would be watching TV anyway, and that can be extremely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. You only need to look at TJ Carr and their cover of ladies Gaelic football for the last 20 years. I think if you look now, this year they're covering 42 of the ladies football championship games live. That's phenomenal. So, if you're looking to promote women's sport, that consistency on free-to-air television is really, really important, and it can only add value. But like sometimes we underestimate the impact of having that access to, and the work that the terrestrial television does. I think it still plays a huge role. We all know about new age technology, but if I go into my front room in a minute, I can turn on and I can watch the Limerick and Tip game, and I can turn over and watch a game of late football on TG Carr. That's really important.
Yeah, guys, the sands of time is about to beat us. Thanks a million, Mary O'Connor, Rory O'Connor, for joining us on the Sunday Paper Review.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back, of course, next Sunday at 1:30 with our next paper review. We are heading very quickly towards the news at 3 o'clock. In the Gaelic games, it is now full-time between Mayo and Leitrim. Mayo have won by 2 goals and 15 points to 10 points. And Tipperary safely through in the Munster Senior Football, winning by 2-11 to 1-11 against Clare. We'll be talking rugby after the news at 3.